This is Our News, the weekend edition, and on the broadcast tonight, the death toll continues to rise as more dead bodies have been found in that sunken Haitian vessel which capsized in waters just off Abaco yesterday. Plus, the PLP calls for 2 cabinet ministers to resign following the outcome of the Frank Smith extortion and bribery case. And on the defense, the PLP leader defends the former Christie administration over the controversial Fire Festival.
Our News is brought to you by Alive.
Good evening, I'm Andrew Knowles, and thanks so much for joining us. Topping the news, 15 more dead bodies have been found in a sunken Haitian vessel which capsized in waters just off Abaco yesterday morning. According to Royal Bahamas Defense Force, it now brings the death toll to 28, making it perhaps one of the worst immigration disasters in recent years. Meanwhile, 2 more Haitian nationals have been found alive on a nearby quay, bringing the total number of those rescued to 17. But according to Chief Superintendent Kevin Mortimer, more migrants are believed to be out there.
Our information thus far, there were about 80 persons or thereabout that would have left Port-au-Paix sometime on the 26th of January.
And the type of boat, any idea?
It's a sailboat. It's believed to be white, about 40 to 60 feet. That's the information we have at this time, and we'll be conducting further inquiries as we go on.
Now, authorities were alerted to the incident on Saturday morning after receiving reports of a body floating in waters between Manowar Key and Marsh Harbor, following a joint operation involving the police and defense forces, along with the Immigration Department, United States counterparts, and the Abaco boating community. 15 Haitian nationals were found alive and 13 bodies recovered from waters yesterday. Now, those who were found alive were taken to the Marsh Harbor Clinic for evaluations and then handed over to immigration.
At present, there are a team of officers conducting investigations in the area of Scotland Key, Guana Key, Hopetown, Fowl Key, and Foots Key, assisted by members of the Basra personnel, along with other civilian persons. This investigation is ongoing, it's active, and hopefully we can get some more information to you shortly based on the investigations.
Now, rescue operations continue into this tragic incident. Well, in other news this evening, Progressive Liberal Party leader Philip Davis today calling for the resignation of 2 members of the Minister administration. Davis said both Health Minister Dr. Dwayne Sands and National Security Minister Marvin Dames must step down over their involvement in the Frank Smith ordeal, or at least be fired. Our Kyle Joaquin has more.
I call today on the ministers to do the right thing.
Just 2 days after Chief Magistrate Joy Ann Ferguson Pratt acquitted former PLP Senator Frank Smith of corruption charges brought against him back in 2017, the focus has now shifted to 2 F&M cabinet ministers. Both Health Minister Dr. Dwayne Sands and National Security Minister Marvin Dames took the witness stand during the trial and were chastised by the Chief Magistrate in her ruling for their involvement with the prosecution's star witness Barbara Hanna and the contract awarded to her Magic Touch Cleaning Company.
The conduct of the minister responsible for the police agreeing to meet the complainant instead of directing his colleague to refer the complainant to the Commissioner of Police is unorthodox, to say the least. Not to mention the persistent phone calls by the 2 government ministers to the virtual complainant, Barbara Hanna, who was clearly avoiding the police.
Magistrate Ferguson Pratt also brought up the fact that Sands awarded Hanna the multi-million-dollar contract without the approval of the PHA board, and after Smith was charged. Meanwhile, Dames met with the prosecution star witness at his constituency office and admitted to calling her several times. The PLP leader said if the 2 ministers don't resign, then Dr. Hubert Minnis, as Prime Minister, should step in and remove them.
It says much. It says much about their moral and ethical character. from the Prime Minister right down to the ordinary backbencher of the FNM. It appears that they are willing to do anything to win an election, even if it means exacting victor's justice on their political opponents.
Davis said he stands by his use of the term political witch hunt to describe the ordeal. But he said he also worries about those without the resources to fight a case like Smith did.
We have to be concerned that ministers of government would actively intervene in cases, acting out of what seems to be a predetermined script written to fulfill a political narrative on corruption.
In the end, Davis said the damage has been done to Frank Smith and his family.
The uncertainty and anxiety visited upon his family over the last year in respect to this matter. You cannot pay. I don't think he cannot be compensated monetarily for it. But I think that's for I think it's just for the purposes of the principle to ensure that things like this never happen again. This is a complete departure from the norm.
For Our News, I'm Kyle Joaquin.
All right, thanks a lot, Kyle. Well, former Deputy Prime Minister Philip Davis is defending the Christie administration over the failed Fire Festival. Davis insists the government of the day was among many of those duped by convicted fraudster Billy McFarlane. Jasmine Brown reports.
Recognizing that this was not a festival that was being promoted by the government, all the government was perhaps doing was facilitating its promotion. And in that regard, we just have to appreciate that the government was in fact deceived.
Fire Festival was scheduled to take place first on Norman's Key and then on Great Exuma over 2 weekends in April and May of 2017. When hundreds of tourists arrived at the site expecting to participate in a once-in-a-lifetime musical experience on the islands of the Exumas, they were shocked to find that nothing was in place for a concert of the scale that was advertised. Competing documentaries released by Hulu and Netflix renewed interest in the festival, bringing attention to a scheme that defrauded investors of huge sums of money and left hundreds of festival attendees stranded after the event's abrupt cancellation. Some have questioned how the government of the day could have allowed the festival to go down in flames. But Davis says they were all fooled by McFarland.
He's been convicted of fraud, and he is now serving time. When one considers what the elements of fraud are, the fundamental element is deceit. So if the government was deceived, or if anyone has been deceived, it's very difficult to criticize them for allowing themselves to be deceived, because deceit in itself has the element of just deceit.
Former Minister of Tourism Obi Wilshcombe, who was the minister at the time of the debacle, has said a team from the ministry worked with the festival organizers on a regular basis, but was not directly involved as it was a private function being held by a private group. Current Tourism Minister Dionisio de Aguilar has said that the ministry got suckered in to the 2017 festival. De Aguilar maintained that the ministry was not complicit in the organization and promotion of the event. He said Ministry of Tourism officials have told him that Fire Festival organizers were arranging it without any consultation with the ministry. As for those locals who have not been paid for their services, Davis had this advice.
They too would have been deceived, and I gather that there is a bankruptcy proceeding going on in the state of New York. They ought to make their claims somehow. I think they ought to band themselves as a committee, and perhaps identify the amounts of funds that they would have been owed, and make a claim in those bankruptcy proceedings to determine to see whether or not there would be any assets left over to be distributed for which they could participate in.
Reporting for Our News, I'm Jasmine Brown.
A former state minister for finance says the Bahamas needs to balance its national sovereignty with meeting the demands of institutions such as the European Union. Our Jared Higgs tells us more.
It's more than just meeting the needs of the Europeans. If we're a sovereign nation, we've got to meet our own needs first.
As the European Union seeks to clamp down on its own citizens avoiding taxes by putting money in low-tax jurisdictions such as the Bahamas, Smith says the resulting blacklisting for non-compliance is often viewed negatively from a political point of view in the Bahamas.
Politically, we have made this almost a political thing. If the Bahamas is on the blacklist, the government who was in charge then has done something wrong. And I think that clouded the issue, because the government is not responsible for being on or even being off in a way. It's the underlying sector, what the banking system is doing. Are they implementing programs to ensure that they know their customer, no fraudulent activities are taking place, etc.? The government doesn't do that.
In March 2018, the Bahamas was blacklisted by the European Union and labeled as a non-cooperative jurisdiction for tax purposes. 2 months later, the country was moved to a grey list and was reported to have until the end of 2018 to fulfill its commitments to the European body, including the passage of several pieces of legislation. Smith recalls a similar situation at the turn of the millennium.
If you go back to when this started, the harmful tax initiative by the Europeans, the OECD, in about the year 2000, we rushed to the table and passed a slew of legislation to meet their demands in order to get us off the blacklist. By politicizing it, we lose sight of the operators, the people beneath, and not recognizing what's happening there. Then the government simply goes and takes this tailor-made set of directives from the European Union, and they're not sitting in the European Union at the table negotiating.
Smith elaborated on how those negotiations should look.
If you want me to help you, I think you're going to have to help me pay for some of this. I can't ask the Bahamian taxpayer to pay for you where the benefits accrue to Europe and not to the Bahamas. Or if you want me to collect this for you, then give me a piece of what I'm collecting. I mean, these are issues that you could have been if you were sitting at the table. But what we're doing is we go in there and okay, you want us to pass new legislation criminalizing income tax evasion? Okay, we'll do that.
In January, Prime Minister Dr. Hubert Minnis led a delegation to Brussels, Belgium, to meet with high-ranking officials of the European Union. Opposition members criticized the trip, saying Minnis didn't meet with anybody on the level of a Prime Minister. Reporting for Our News, I'm Jared Higgs.
Well, rehabilitation and reducing the recidivism rate of inmates are top priorities of the Bahamas Department of Corrections. The National Security Minister last week said they are committed to equipping inmates with the necessary tools to be reintegrated into society. With more, here's Julian Gray.
Despite overcrowding at the Department of Corrections, National Security Minister Marvin Dame said they are not looking into building a new prison. Instead, he says government will use other methods to deal with that problem.
We need to look first and foremost at, whether many of the persons who are currently in there, if there's a need for all of them to be there. And so this is why we're so aggressively pursuing rehabilitation. We're pursuing parole. And that's how it works in many of the developed societies or countries.
Back in October, the prison population stood at over 1,700 inmates. Maximum security was overcrowded by almost 800 inmates. With the rise in arrests of both Bahamians and foreign nationals, Dame said rehabilitation is more important. Last year, the government, through the Citizen Security and Justice Program, provided over 100 inmates with the opportunity to learn technical skills at BTVI. The National Security Minister said some of those inmates will be released early so that they can get a jump start on their second chance.
And, during the end of last year, we had more than 100 inmates, the first cohort, who would have graduated, and a number of them are scheduled to be released shortly. As a matter of fact, I'm recommending that a few of them, that their times are cut short, and they're afforded the opportunity to be released early so that they can get a jump start.
The Department of Corrections is focusing on reducing the inmate levels, and according to the National Security Minister, that comes through preparing them for the real world.
Our approach is that we want to reduce the inmate level at Her Majesty's, the Department of Corrections. It's important that we do. And we're taking every steps to do that. But one thing we want to make certain of, that once those persons are released, that they are prepared and it is our job to prepare them to be reintegrated into society. And part of that process is to provide them the skills that they are so desperately in need of to function in the real world, so to speak.
Dame said the early release and skills training will hopefully reduce the recidivism rate.
This is our government's attempt and efforts to show and demonstrate to those persons who are incarcerated at the Bahamas Department of Corrections that we are willing to provide you an opportunity for a second chance. And we hope that they will embrace this opportunity and we never see them again there. But this is only the beginning. We're working assiduously on a number of initiatives that will quicken this.
Reporting for Our News Weekend, I'm Jillian Gray.
We will take our first break here, but still ahead tonight. The Bahamas' lead negotiator says many Bahamians still not on board with the country's accession to the WTO. That story and more coming up from Our News.